we can begin. Okay, so we are going to start with the identities today. We have two different types of identities. We have the quotient identity and we have the square identity. So we have the quotient and we have the square. So quotient identity is tan theta is equal to sine theta over cos theta. And we have the square identity, which is your sin squared theta plus cos squared theta, which is equal to 1. So tan theta, which is a quotient identity, equals sine theta over cos theta. We can also write it as 1 over tan theta. And that will be equal to your cos theta and your sine theta. Now, for the square identity, we can first make the sine squared theta the subject of the formula. For example, sine squared theta, if we make the subject of sine squared theta subject of the formula, then we are going to say 1 minus cos squared theta, which means that this cos will walk to this side. Now, if we make cos theta the subject, cos squared theta the subject of the formula, then in that case, cos squared theta, it will become 1 minus sine squared theta. So the next thing after the identities, we say we have two different identities. We have quotient and we have squared. And we know now the formulas for the quotient identity and square identity. The next thing we are going to look at is the reduction formula. Just going to change the color. Okay. So reduction formula, we need to remember the Cartesian plane in order to understand the reduction formula. So this is 360 degrees or 0 degrees here. Then we have 90 degrees. We have 180 degrees. We have 270 degrees. Now, this is quadrant number 1. This is your quadrant number 2. Now, for us to understand the reduction formula, we need to understand the cast rule. So the cast rule is quadrant 1, everything is positive in the quadrant 1. Quadrant 4, C, A, then S, and then T. Which means in quadrant 1, all the trig ratios are positive. In quadrant 2, sine is positive. In quadrant 3, tan is positive. And in quadrant 4, C or cosine is positive. Now the reduction formulas are, the first reduction formula is your 180 degrees minus theta. Then we have 180 degrees positive theta. Theta is an angle. So 180 minus angle, 180 positive angle, degrees plus an angle. So this positive minus theta, 180 minus theta lives in the second quadrant. 180 positive theta lives in the third quadrant. And then we have something called 360 minus theta. And this is in the quadrant 4. Now, if I give you the values, just write it. Okay, now we have different values we can read from these. So number one is, if I give you sine 180 degrees minus theta, this will be equal to positive sine theta. Why positive? Because 180 minus theta lies in the quadrant 2, and that's why the sign is positive in quadrant 2. Therefore, we have the positive sign here. Another thing, if I give you cos 180 degrees minus theta, then this means that it is equal to minus cos theta. Why minus cos theta? Because again, 180 degrees minus theta lies in the second quadrant, and only sine is positive in the second quadrant. So that's why the cos 180 degrees minus theta is negative cos theta. Then we have tan. (180 degrees minus theta), and this will also give you negative tan theta, because of the same reason that sine theta is only positive in quadrant 2, where 180 degree minus theta resides. Now let's look at another examples. If I give you cos 180 plus theta. Please know that if you understand these, where tan theta, why we say that tan theta is equal to sine theta over cos theta, or why we say that sine square theta is same as or equal to 1 minus cos square theta, or what is the value of sine 180 minus theta if this is positive sine theta, then the only thing after that is left for grade 12 is substitution. You see these type of questions, they will ask you to solve or to simplify or substitute all of these. If you don't know that sine 180 minus theta is equal to positive sine theta, you won't be able to proceed with the question. That's why to understand these basic things is very important before we move on to the complicated parts. So cos 180 plus theta is equal to minus cos theta. Can you tell me why I said minus cos theta and not positive cos theta in this case? Yes, can you tell me why I said minus? cos theta and not the positive cos theta? Are you with me? Okay, okay. So, do you understand this cast diagram? Okay. From this cast diagram, right, the cast diagram is basic. Now, when we are looking at reduction formulas, there are three reduction formulas we looked at. There is 180 minus theta, there is 180 positive theta, and there is 360 minus theta. Like we said, that when we draw Cartesian plane and C, A, S, T, they always come, A will always come in the first quadrant, S will always come in the second quadrant, T will always come in the third, and C in the fourth. So they are the houses of these, right? No problem, no problem. You can even use your microphone to answer. It's just you and me in the class. Please don't feel shy. Okay, let's continue. So we were saying that we said that quadrant 1 always will house all the positive trig ratios. Quadrant 2 will house sine, which is positive. Quadrant 3 will house tan, and quadrant 4 will house cos. Same like this cast diagram, we use a reduction formula like this. So we say that 180 minus theta is number one reduction formula. And this will always reside in the quadrant 2. This is its house. It lives there. It won't move from there. Why? Because you see this 180 degrees and 360 degrees line. If you go clockwise direction, all the angles in the clockwise direction is 180 minus less than 180. So we say 180 minus an angle. So 180 minus theta resides in quadrant 2. If we go clockwise, anti-clockwise direction towards this side, there is all the values which are bigger than 180. That's why we say that 180 plus theta will live in this quadrant. So if we subtract an angle from 180, that the value will be less than 180 degrees, right? That's why we say that 180 minus theta lives in the second quadrant. If we add an angle to 180 degrees, the value will always be greater than 180 degrees. For example, 180 degrees plus 1 or plus 30 degrees, plus 45 degrees. All the values will be greater than 180 degrees. That's why we say that the house which is next to 180 degrees line on the Cartesian plane, that will reside there, or the 180 plus theta angle will live. Now we know that the reduction formula 180 minus theta lives in the quadrant 2, and all the values of sines are positive in quadrant 2. Then in quadrant 3, 180 plus theta lives in quadrant 3, and all the values of tan are positive in quadrant 3. Again, cosine lives in the quadrant 4, and for the quadrant 4, now we look onto the right hand side. We have this 360 here, 360 here, and we say, okay, all the values less than 360 or 0, right? If we look at all the positive angles, we say this is the 360 degrees positive theta. But we don't need this angle to reduce to use in the reduction formula. So we are just going to ignore this part. Okay, but we say, okay, if we go in the clockwise direction, there is 360 degrees and there is 270, which mean that if we go clockwise direction, the values will start to decrease. That's why we say that this quadrant 4, there will 360 minus theta will reside in quadrant 4. Now we have all this information. Quadrant 1, everything is positive. Quadrant 2, there is reduction formula 180 minus theta, but the sign values are positive. Quadrant 3, there is reduction formula 180 plus theta, but only the tan values are positive. And 360 minus theta lives in the quadrant 4, where the cos values are positive. So that's why when I say sine 180 minus theta, the positive is here because second quadrant is the house of sine. That is why we have the positive values of sine theta. But we know from the cast rule that cosine and tan will be negative in this quadrant. So if I say cos or cosine of 180 minus theta, it will give you minus cos theta, which is telling us that the cos value will be negative. Tan 180 minus theta, this means that again it is in quadrant 2. Only the sign values are positive in quadrant 2. That's why the tan value will be negative. Now we have cos 180 plus theta. We say this is minus cos theta. Why? Because still it is in the quadrant where only tan is positive and cos and sine is negative. That's why 180 positive theta in quadrant 3, or we say cos 180 plus theta. 180 plus theta lives here in the third quadrant where tan is positive. So cos will automatically be negative in this. And if I say sine 180 plus theta, this will also give you the negative value of sine. Now let's look at tan. Tan 180 plus theta. Tan 180 plus theta lives in the third quadrant where we know that tan values are positive. So we will say positive tan theta. So we are reducing this angle and we are saying this is equal to positive tan theta. Now, last example is cos 360 minus theta. We say cos 360 minus theta resides in the quadrant 4 and cos is positive in quadrant 4. That's why we will give a positive sign to the cos and we will say this is equal to positive cos theta. Any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Let's say another thing. If I say sine, this one you will solve for me, right? You will tell me what is the reduced angle for this one. Sine 360 minus theta, what will be the reduced angle? Yes, try Awami. Sine 360 minus theta, what will be the reduced angle be? Why cos? We are looking at sine. They already told you that this is sine. This cannot change. This will be sine. But 360 minus theta will help us decide whether to put positive sign next to the sin or whether to put negative sign next to the sin value. Yes, so will the value of sine be positive or negative? Okay, no problem. So, okay, if I look at this alone, right, sine 180 minus theta, and I ask you to reduce it, this will give me an angle which is sine theta, right? But this 180 minus theta, this will help me decide. So, this part of the equation will help me decide whether to put whether to put positive or negative sign. While this part of the sine 180 minus theta are telling me that this ratio is sine theta. This is the reduction formula. We are not looking at co-functions yet. When you are saying that sine 360 minus theta will change into cos theta, you are talking about the co-functions. But that also don't work like that, right? You are getting confused between the two different rules. So please look at it again. Sine 180 minus theta, there are two parts to this. There is sine part and there is 180 minus theta. Sine part is telling us that this angle will be reduced to sine. This won't change, right? But to positive value or to negative value. The other part of this question, 180 minus theta, will help us decide. We know that 180 minus theta lives in the second quadrant, where the sine value is positive. So we will say, okay, if the 180 minus theta lives in the house where all the sine value is positive, then I will put positive sign next to it. Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now try again. Sine 360 minus theta. What do you think the reduced angle will be? Sine 360 minus theta. Very good. So the first part is to write this sine theta, an angle of sine. Now, the second part of the question is asking us to look at this part. Now, what is this telling us? Whether the sine theta 360 minus theta, where the house in which 360 minus theta lives in on the Cartesian plane, will the sine value be positive or negative? And why is that positive? Look at it again. Look at the Cartesian plane where 360 minus theta is on the fourth quadrant. In the fourth quadrant, what trig ratios are positive? only cos is positive in the fourth quadrant. So we will say this is equals to negative sine theta, because 360 is in the quadrant where only cosine is positive. For example, if I give you cos 360 minus theta, cos me is telling us to write cos, and 360 minus theta, this part of the question is telling us whether there is a positive sign next to it or the negative sign next to it. So 360 minus theta is living in the same house where the cos is positive in. So we will put the positive next to the cos. What about tan? 360 minus theta. What will this give us? Yes, Mami, try and answer this. Tan 360 minus theta. Very good. So this will give us the value of negative tan theta. Negative tan theta. What if I give you, can I write here? Or just put it. Okay. What if I give you sine 180 plus theta? What will this tell us? Yes, reduce this angle. Sine 180 plus theta. I know you can do it. You got tan 360 minus theta correct. That is equal to minus tan theta. We look at the first part, which is saying the trig ratio name. And then we look at the second part, which is 180 plus theta. Check in which quadrant 180 plus theta resides in, and then decide whether to give it a negative sign or positive sign. So yes, 180 plus theta. Sine 180 plus theta. Please give me an answer. This is equal to negative sine theta. Excellent work. Very good. Now you got it right. Okay. Now we move on to the co-function and reduction formula related to those co-functions. Now this sign will change into cos, but I will tell you why. We understood everything so far. Okay. Now let's move a little bit. Okay. Now let's draw a quick cast diagram. We say CAST. We gave 90 degrees here. This is 360. This is 270. And this is 180 degrees. Now, we know this is quadrant 1. Quadrant 2, this is very basic, right? We've been doing this from grade 10 class. So we know that cast, what is cast diagram, where all the quadrants are, and which quadrant, what trig ratio is positive in. Now we have the co-functions and reduction formula. So before we move on to the co-function and reduction formula, one thing to notice is that when we are dealing with co-function and reduction formulas related to the co-function, we are looking at this 90 degrees. This is our reference point on the Cartesian plane, the 90 degrees. On the right hand side, all the values will be less than 90 degrees. Then we will say all the angles will be 90 degrees minus theta. On the left hand side, everything will be greater than 90 degrees. So we will say all the angles will be 90 degrees plus theta. Okay. This rule we have established so far. Now you know that why I put 90 minus theta and 90 positive theta in the quadrant 1 and 2. Understood? Okay. Now we move on to before I can explain to you how this Cartesian plane works, like the other one, we need to understand something. If I give you sine 10 theta, this will be equal to what? Use your calculator to find sine 10 value. This will give you 0,173. Now here's an interesting part. If I give you cos 80 degrees, this is also equal to 0,173. You can double check using your calculator. Therefore, we say that sine 10 is equal to cos 80. Okay, so notice something very interesting here. This 10 here and this 80 here. Right? These are showing us angles. And if I add these two, 80 plus 10 will give you 90 degrees. Correct? So we use this co-function and reduction formula when we add two angles, and this give us the sum of 90 degrees. That is why we say that sine 10 is the co-function of cos 80 degrees, because this angle here and this angle here adds up to 90 degrees. That's why we say sine 10 and cos 180 degree is co-function, because they have the same values, and when we add their angle, they will be equal to 90 degrees. Now we have questions arising from here. The question number 1. Now we need to reduce the co-functions. We say, if I give you sine 90 minus theta, this will be equal to positive cos theta. Why? Because 90 minus theta lies in the quadrant where all the trig ratios, cos, tan, and sine, everything is positive. Right? And sine theta is the co-function for cos. So we will change this sine 90 minus theta into the cos theta, and we will put positive sign, and this angle is same as this angle here. Now, again, cos 90 minus theta will give you positive sin theta. Why positive? Because in the 90 minus theta quadrant, everything is positive, all the ratios, and cos theta will change into sin theta. This angle here is equal to this angle. So this means that these are the co-functions reduced. Now, sin theta sin 90 plus theta will give you cos theta, and cos now you see, notice here sin 90 plus theta is positive. Why? Because 90 plus theta is in the sin quadrant. That's why we will write positive here. Cos 90 plus theta is equal to minus sin theta or sin theta. And we say that in the 90 plus theta quadrant, cosine is negative. That's why we use minus sin theta. So cos becomes sin, and this angle theta is this angle theta. Any questions? Do you understand so far? Yes, you can use your microphone or chat box to answer. If you have any question, please feel free to ask me before we move on to the next part. We are going to look at negative angles now. Now we are looking at negative angles. Now, negative angles, these angles are formed when we are measuring in a clockwise direction. Now let's draw a quick diagram of Cartesian plane and then we can move from there. Let us say this is A, this is C, this is T, and this is S. And we have a angle coming out here, and we have an angle coming out of here. Now, we know that when we measure angles in the positive direction, we will go anti-clockwise, right? So if I measure theta from here in the anti-clockwise direction, all the positive values of theta I will get in the anti-clockwise direction. But if I move towards clockwise direction, so this is the clockwise direction, I will get all the values of theta negative. Okay, so we have a Cartesian plane, we have a cast diagram, we know quadrant 1 angles, all angles are positive, quadrant 2 sine is
Ma'am,
tan, yes.
ma'am, I have a hard time seeing the color that you chose.
Okay, no problem. Let's change the color. So this is the positive theta. Okay, now this is your negative theta. So we said that if we measure from x-axis in the anti-clockwise direction, we will get all the values of theta positive. The angles will be positive. But if we go into the anti-clockwise direction, everything will be positive, all the angles. If we go in the negative or the anti-clockwise direction, we will get all the negative theta angles, or all the angles will be in negative. So for example, if I give you sine minus theta, this will give you minus sine theta. Okay, do you understand why we have negative here and why the angle becomes positive? Look at the diagram. Apply the knowledge I have told you in the previous two things. And are you able to tell me why this negative sin is here and theta becomes positive? Give it a try. We are referring to the cast diagram. That's what I can tell you. Okay, let me explain. So sin negative angle will give you negative sin but positive angle. Why? Because if you look at closely, this theta is this theta, right? And minus theta means we are going into the anti-clockwise direction, and so the cos value will be positive in this direction, and then minus sin theta. Why? Because this is the cos quadrant and the sign is negative in the cos quadrant. That's why we say minus sin theta. If I give you cos negative angle, cos negative theta, the answer will be cos theta. Theta will become positive, but the cos will also remain positive. Why? Because cos, this angle is of cos, and in this quadrant, the cos is positive. So this is cos quadrant. Then now tan negative theta will become your minus tan theta. Angle is positive, but the tan or the ratio, trig ratio is negative. Why? Again, because this is your cos's triangle, quadrant. So sin minus theta is equal to minus sin theta. Cos minus theta is equal to cos theta, and tan minus theta is equal to minus tan theta. We are looking at the cos diagram. We know that in this quadrant, sin and tan is negative. That's why we have negative sign next to the sign sin and tan. And we say that cos is positive. That's why we have positive angle. So we are ignoring this part of the diagram. So um, if I say sin minus theta, cos minus theta, and tan minus theta, this minus theta is telling me to look at quadrant 3. Quadrant 4. Why? Because we start to measure angles from the right hand side, and either we go clockwise direction or we go anti-clockwise direction. If we go anti-clockwise this side, then all the values will be positive. And if we go negative, clockwise, then all the values will be negative. So minus theta is telling us that we are going in the negative direction. We are going in the clockwise direction where theta is negative. Now in this quadrant, we know this quadrant from the cast rule that this is only cosine is positive in this quadrant. Sine is negative, and tan is also negative in this quadrant, right? Now they want the value of sine negative theta. They told you to draw a line or to draw a triangle in the quadrant 4. The theta is negative. This is what it is. What is telling us that to look in the quadrant 4. Now they want the value of sine. So will the sine be positive or negative? Because theta is positive, right? We are in the right direction. Theta is positive for both sine, cos, and tan. Now we say that sine value will be negative and angle will be positive. Why? Because in the quadrant 4, cosine and tan is negative. So sine value is negative and tan value is negative, but the cosine is positive because this is the cos quadrant. So these are the 3 different negative angles. Any questions? Yes, Swami, any question?
No, ma'am.
No? Okay, I think we are past our time. It is 12:19, and the next lesson I have with you today is from 1 to 2:30. So do you want the break, or we can continue for another hour and finish it one time?
Can you please finish it one time, ma'am?
Okay, no problem. Okay, we can continue then. Let me just stop recording and then I can start recording so it will be easier for me to